Good morning, YouTube. Warbles on a lot here. 7th of February 2013, getting ready for Outsiders and First Dog on the Moon.
Time now for Outsiders. I'm Barry Cassidy, and you're not.
Serious consideration has been given in this office to changing that sting, moving Barry on. Well, look, it's only been 4 years. Let's not rush to judgment. Our Outsiders this morning, Travis McLeod, he's Chief Executive Officer of the Centre of Policy Development. Stephen Brooke, Features Editor for The Australian, and Esther Anatolitis. She's Director of Regional Arts Victoria. Welcome to you all.
Hi, great to be here.
Good morning.
It's been, look, there have been a lot of things bubbling around in politics this week, but none, I suspect, of the moral dimension of the conversation that followed the High Court decision. This was the PM speaking pretty robustly on the issue of border security in the Parliament.
The people smugglers will not prevail over our sovereignty. Our borders are secure. The line has to be drawn somewhere, and it is drawn at our border.
Tough place to draw lines, and well, what's excluded? What's on either side of those lines? Human lives. There are consequences, and the Anglican Dean of Brisbane was among the church community to offer, well, perhaps a more compassionate position than that being offered by politics.
We feel so desperate that we need to do something desperate, and so we're rekindling the medieval idea of sanctuary, of a church as a safe place.
It's an interesting thing, is that a church community being driven to that sort of a position of offering the cathedral in Brisbane as some sort of sanctuary for refugees here. This is a really tough thing, and the fact that there's such political consensus about offshore detention, about the harshness of that as a deterrent, suggests that as a country we've kind of made up our mind on this.
It's a tough thing because our political leadership is stuck in the crunch mode of election cycle politics. I mean, we've got the Anglican Church Trades Hall in Melbourne, the entire state of Victoria. We've had Premier Daniel Andrews say, look, we will take them in Victoria. It's, I've got in my mind all of the repeated quotes that George Megalogenis outlines in Australia's Second Chance, where we hear again and again the exact same, rhetoric of, yes, we can really make a difference by closing our borders, and we find again and again that does not support the Australian multicultural cause and does not support our global human rights responsibilities. It's to pretend that cruel, inhumane, absolutely despicable policies of Australia can have any kind of effect on the global factors that are causing and creating more and more refugees than we've ever seen in our lifetimes is absolutely ludicrous, and we have obligations that we're not meeting.
And yet in our narrow part of the world, Stephen Brooke, it appears to have had that effect that we hear so much of stopping boats, of preventing drownings at sea. And it would seem that we as a people are comfortable with that consequence, and that we think that the detention that we see is a reasonable price to pay for stopping those boats, securing those borders.
Well, there's the detention aspect. There's the desire amongst the public to have certainty on this policy. There's also the desire to stop deaths at sea, which we've seen the horrible toll that occurs when these tough border policies are relaxed, but also the desire to have refugees come to Australia under programs, not under asylum seekers. And in fact, Australia has increased its intake of refugees, and we've been welcoming families from Syria recently, which I think the government is very keen to alert people to. That fact is only been achieved because the Australian public is very comfortable with our border protection policies.
Travis, is there a way that we can sort of walk and chew gum here from a policy point of view?
Well, I think there has to be, Jonathan. I think what made Operation Sovereign Borders seemingly effective in the short term is also what makes it deeply unsustainable in the long term. Part of the problem on both sides is that they've been looking days, maybe months ahead. All the policy has been reactive. And instead of looking 5, 10, 15 years ahead to look at what the caseload may be of people on the move, including because of climate-induced displacement, and doing something about a regional protection architecture which is more or less deficient or absent. If we compare ourselves to Europe and we saw how that was tested, how that is still being tested over the last 12 months. It needs to get far further ahead and be proactive in coming up with creative solutions, walking and chewing gum at the same time. One thing to say about the High Court decision is that it did give the legal green light on this occasion, but there are other decisions on foot, including in relation to Manus, and the joint reasons made it very clear that it was not a blank check, that the offshore processing centres had to be for processing, and that detention was incidental to that.
I mean, this is the point that we're at now, isn't it? We did something dramatic and determined. It appears to have had that effect of stopping the flow of boats, although as we heard this week that they still come and we're still turning them back. And yet we're now stuck at this position of having this body of people, and we're unsure of what to do with them. That issue of the processing, it seems this is too tough. This is too hard to resolve.
And no unilateral solution will resolve it. We need a more effective regional response that is dignified, it's durable, and it's effective.
We say those words, but then again, the PM on TV this morning with Barry Cassidy on Insiders on ABC TV, and saying I have to be particularly careful with everything I say because every word I use will be parsed by people seeking to take advantage. Yes, this is a terrible quandary. We don't want people smuggling. We can't simply open our borders because I think of the danger of the voyage apart from anything else. And yet we have a body of people that we're treating abominably.
It's a terrible quandary because we're not being honest about it. People smuggling, it's of course a horrible thing. And people who are engaged in that work are going to keep finding ways to do that. To mistreat people in Australia who are fleeing persecution, who are fleeing contexts that we can't possibly imagine, is unconscionable. We can work, as Trevor was saying, we can work in collaborative ways to address people smuggling, but we need to be honest about the fact that there are factors around the world that are unfortunately creating a great many refugee conditions, including environmental in the future. I think it's a terribly important point about what's sustainable and unsustainable about this. We can't keep looking at the next 5 minutes and popular opinion. And we certainly can't expect as citizens to believe that that boats have stopped when that policies have worked, when the premise of that belief as citizens is that we're not told about those on-water issues. So what we need is some significant honesty and to just stop pretending this is a simple issue, that we can just, buck up and say we're going to tighten our borders. No, it's actually quite complex. It's global, it's human, and we need to approach it with sophistication.
That's a tough thing, isn't it, Stephen? I mean, admitting that complexity, and that's the thing that we don't do well across a broad range of areas in our political life. This is an issue of such complexity. Perhaps the way in which we approach these things is inappropriate. We don't have that honesty that Esther talks about. We don't have that sort of clarity of conversation around this.
Well, we do have a political discourse that's becoming more and more an exchange of tweets. So full credit to outlets like Radio National that are prepared to spend more than 140 characters trying to get to the heart of these issues. I think where there's a lack of knowledge is really about these detention systems in Manus Island and Nauru, and journalists are not allowed on them. They're not open to scrutiny. It's clear that there's massive delays and backlogs in processing these asylum seekers and finding outcomes for where they're going to live, for where they're going to be moved on to. And clearly that is exacerbating the problem. And if this system was more efficient and handled better, then a lot of the distress that they're experiencing would be lessened.
There's a bit of a Mexican standoff there, isn't there, Travis? I mean, those people do not want to budge, and they're being offered, as the PM has again suggested today, every opportunity to return home. That's not what they want, and yet bringing them to this country would, I think it's undoubtedly true, be a signal which would encourage that human traffic once more.
That's right, and a lot of what the government may do in this area, more creative solutions, including resettling here, I don't think they'll be very public about it. It is a Mexican standoff publicly. That's why several organisations in the region, including ours, have brought together 5 of the participating governments, including Australia, And there are government representatives in a personal capacity, non-government representatives, IOM and UNHCR, trying to come up with, over 3 years, a more effective, dignified and humane regional policy architecture. And we've tried to do that by taking the heat out of the issues, by giving them time to do that properly. But we have to hasten slowly because lives are on the line.
Yeah, it's a thing of ridiculous complexity and of great human consequence, more than our three little minds can solve in this short space this morning. Outsiders on Sunday Extra: Travis McLeod, Stephen Brook, Esther Anatolitis. Something slightly lighter, but weirdly in a similar vein, this is coming to a screen near you this week.
Meet the Habibs, Australia's newest millionaires.
How much did we win? 22 million.
We're billionaires? And they just moved in to Australia's poshest suburb.
I want to speak to the new owner right now.
You're looking at him.
The best thing I could say about this, Stephen Brook, this is such a running theme in Australian TV comedy, the clash of culture in the suburban heartland. So at least it points to a truth of us that we are incredibly diverse and that perhaps sometimes runs comically around the edges.
Well, we are, but all too regretfully, we rarely see ethnic representation on TV. This Here Come the Habibs is about a Lebanese family, I believe, who win big and then move into Vaucluse, perhaps down the road from Malcolm Turnbull's mansion.
Would, yes.
Yeah. And I was struck with all the hype around this program, which I think will do very well because I believe there's a real appetite for this kind of comedy. When was the last time we saw a Lebanese family depicted on Australian television in a drama series or in a comedy? Anyway, I couldn't answer that question.
A while back, I mean, with Lex Marinos in Kingswood Country springs to mind.
I think I was in primary school when Kingswood Country went to air.
Money on the fridge, Wog.
Yeah, but a popular show, and I think that Australians enjoyed seeing people from different ethnic backgrounds represented.
We don't represent ourselves very well, Esther. This is true.
We don't. And just on Stephen's point, Australians enjoy seeing themselves, not just people from different backgrounds. This is a multicultural country. This is the first time that an Australian series has been commissioned, paid for, and shown on Channel 9 for many years. So this is a story.
A thing in itself.
Which is very, very much a thing in itself. You know, I've seen the trailer. I've read what people have written who've seen the work, and having previously worked in the WOG industry myself some time ago, it is really, really fun to just see. I mean, you know, Tahir is a smart guy. I'm quite looking forward to seeing the writing about this. I would love to have seen, though. I mean, you look at what the amazing Benjamin Law has done with the family law. That is humour, but it is also subtle and complex, and there are family roles and gender roles, and, you know, so I'm hoping that the new series won't be a kind of a, you know, Beverly Hillbillies for today.
We're sort of creepy now, aren't we, Travis? I mean, black humour on ABC this week past, family law, Here Come the Beebs. We're starting to kind of, in this thing of telling Australian stories with a capital A and a capital S, an admission that that's not just white bread.
Which is a good admission, right? Like, we want to celebrate, you know, the great multicultural success that is Australia, and we've probably got the most cohesive multicultural society in the world, and we should celebrate it. I think Esther's sort of caution is a good one, though. That let's hope that they're subtly, sort of playfully prodding at some of the stereotypes that white Australians have about those that have come from other countries and have other ethnic origins. And if it does that through comedy, you know, it's not a bad place to start.
And that seems to be the premise, that it's really about exposing, you know, the anxieties and the racism of white Australia, which sounds like fun. But I don't know, the confected outrage about this is always hilarious.
That has been pretty strong. Look, it's, if you want to hear more about Here Come the Habibs, and who wouldn't, RNTV Club podcast.
I think I'll stop this movie now because we're really close to the upload limit.